In 2015, Apple was investing $55 billion a year in China. Apple's entire supply chain is based in China. They depend on China. That's where they make money. Then, as exactly the biggest technology company in the world, probably the biggest rival of the United States, to become the superpower, technological and military that it is today, Apple was captured by the Chinese Communist Party's CCP. Nearly 90% of iPhones are made in China. Apple knows that at any time, Xi Jinping may end the company. Apple is not authorized leaving China and transfer your production to another place. But there is a twist in this story. Apple has always known about this. Actually, she is one of those most responsible. For sustaining the communist regime, he invested hundreds of billions of dollars in the regime. More than any company has done before. $55 billion per year. Since 2015. That's $500 billion in just 10 years. More than 10 times the value of the chip law of President Biden or President Trump's initiative. With the Golden Dome, so let's try. Understand how Apple got into this situation. Because in 1999, absolutely no Apple products were manufactured in China. And the company didn't sell anything there. 10 years later, practically all its products were made in China, which have become one of Apple's largest markets. This change can be explained by something that happened in 1996. Apple was almost going with a loss of $740 million. That year, the equivalent of $5 billion at current values. The company even hired a lawyer, specializing in bankruptcy, because it was days ago, of not being able to pay your debts. It seems reasonable to know this now, seeing the success of Apple. But at the time, she was losing to the competitors in the computer sector. Actually, it was at this time that Apple sold the Apple bite of your logo. The market was flooded with PCs running Windows, with standardized components, and then a new business model emerged. The outsourcing of automotive manufacturing. PC companies started to hire others for manufacturing and assembling components. The same outsourced companies served the entire industry. Discover huge economies of scale. After these third-party companies migrated abroad, where wages were lower, Apple was lagging behind. For not participating in it, their designs were unique and difficult to reproduce, and Steve Jobs was an advocate of making everything internally. So Apple produced most of its products, including at the Fremont factory. Continues, but Apple prices came out of control, and the company knew it needed to change. In 1980, opened its first factory in Ireland. In 1981, built a factory in Singapore. In the same year, began to outsource with the SE Systems, an American company, however, did not fully commit. In 1991, opened another factory of its own in Colorado. It wasn't working. After near bankruptcy, the company changed course. Steve Jobs said, "Think differently, but maybe not that much." After some tests in Mexico, Apple moved to Asia, like most American companies. But China was still off the radar, because it was a communist country, poor and underdeveloped. South Korea was growing rapidly. But a Taiwanese company called Hon Hai Precision Industry, better known as Foxconn, would completely change the game. It was founded by Terry Gou, a more important name than most people think. He not only created one of the largest companies in the world, but also terrible to build the second largest economy in the world, China. In 1987, Taiwanese government suspended martial law. allowing interpreters to renegotiate with mainland China. This happened 38 years after the Chinese Civil War that separated the communist continent from the nationalist island of Taiwan. At the same time, China began to open up to the world, with free reforms, market that led by a shopping Terry Go, or Uncle Terry, took this opportunity like no one else in southeastern Chinese provinces. He built numerous Foxconn factories, including an entire city with up to 500,000 workers. There are many other Foxconn factories spread across China. Out Denzil Ping. No one has done more for the industrialization of China than Terry. He didn't just build a company. He accelerated the country's industrial revolution, and behind the rise of Foxconn, there was an even bigger company, Apple. In about 10 years, Apple went from zero customer for almost single Foxconn customer. It all started in the year 2000 with Foxconn riding iMac G3 models. The success was so great that in 2003, with iPod selling like never before, Foxconn also took over its manufacture. In 2005 came the Mac Mini. In 2006, the MacBooks. But the biggest contract came in 2007, the launch of the iPhone. Foxconn bet everything on this product. Luckily for them, this all included 40 floors and no labor laws. The company built huge factories for iPhones, believing in the success of the device, and got it right. In the following years, iPhone would become Apple's most important product, responsible for more than half of the company's revenue. Today, Apple is another smartphone company, then computers, and Foxconn profited like never before, conquering almost the iPhone assembly monopoly. But something strange about this story, the Chinese government helped Foxconn a lot. Very same tax exemption, mild regulations, cheap loans, free land, and even direct investments. The most alarming detail, the CCP allowed Foxconn to exploit Chinese workers. Hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of people, left the countryside to work in the factories without human rights or labor laws. Earning 50 cents an hour, were penalized for talking at work. They took 12-hour shifts every day and slept in precarious housing with 8 to 12 people per room. When these stories came to light, it Apple's image. But returning to the CCP, why allow a Taiwanese company exploit its citizens to make products to the United States? The answer, the CCP made an irrecusable proposal. And when Apple became totally dependent on China, the regime would use one of the most innovative companies in the world in its favor. And it worked. Today, practically all Apple products originate in China. And with the Foxconn, Apple couldn't have a better partner. The model seemed to work for everyone. Less for workers. China's GDP has grown a lot thanks to Apple. Foxconn's revenue has skyrocketed. Apple has become one of the most profitable companies in the world. After 2010, China is no longer just a manufacturing base. Chinese consumers began to gain more, and Apple started selling a lot. In the country, iPhone became the status symbol greater than in the United States. In 2015, Apple's revenue in China reached almost £60, 25% of all your revenue. In 2023, China even surpassed the United States on iPhone sales. It is safe to say that Apple would not be a $3 trillion today, but there were cracks in Apple's strategy with the country. Reports denounced human rights abuses in factories in Foxconn, child labor disguised as internships, mass suicides, network point, be installed in buildings to prevent jumps. There are reports of Uyghurs' slave labor in Xinjiang. Apple responded with apologies, audits, and liability reports. But the problem persists because the Foxconn model depends on low wages, which implies low well-being and few rights. And the Chinese government support it because you want to explore Apple. But the game turned into 2013 when Xi Jinping came to power. One day after its inauguration, state media started attacking Apple, saying he offered worse guarantees in China than in other countries, or that it was false. The problem was fake stores selling products. Apple has corrected the information, but was even more attacked. Tim Cook curved, apologized, and created a better warranty policy in China than in the United States. But it was just the beginning. In 2014, at least 30 companies, doctors were the target of arrests. Antitrust, which has paid 1 billion fines, and was forced to open joint ventures in China, what led to the loss of intellectual property. Other companies, such as Google and Facebook, were already banned in China. Apple wanted to avoid the same fate and created the Group of Eight, an internal team dedicated to China and the CCP. The strategy was to help China achieve its own goals. And that's what they did. Apple started one of the biggest knowledge transfers and manufacturing capacity of modern history. In 2015, he invested $55 billion a year in China. To compare, the chip law in the United States, some of $280 billion. In 10 years, $28 billion a year. The post-war Marshall Plan was $32 billion a year. At current values, Apple invested much more. Part of this investment was in education. Apple met about 28 million Chinese, including thousands of cigarettes. These Chinese Indians took their knowledge to universities. And local companies, Apple, also helped build the entire supply chain. Chinese. Today, practically all Apple vendors operate in China. This is part of what is called the magnetic chain. About CCP control is the biggest reason Apple cannot leave China. This knowledge transfer was crucial for China's economic and military growth. As Alexander Hamilton said, the prosperity of the industry is linked to wealth, independence, and national security. And that goes for guns too. The knowledge used to make iPhones can be applied in missile manufacturing, tanks and drones. In 2015, Xi Jinping clothes made in China. 2025, to make China an industrial power. And 10 years later, Apple has put a lot into this. As communists say, the capitalists, they will sell us the rope with which we will hang them. Since then, Apple continued to give in. In 2017, removed all VPN apps from App Store in China, helping the CCP enforce the Great Firewall. Also removed the New York Times app, stored data from Chinese users in data centers, staked, blocked aluminum platforms, Bible and Quran apps, and limited airdrop during protests. Apple became an accomplice to the regime. This is shocking coming from an American company, and the situation gets worse, with attention eyed at China, mainly regarding Taiwan. If there is war, Apple can break. The company also depends on TSMC in Taiwan. For your chips, Apple wants to switch production to India and Vietnam, and it has already started to expand there, but build iPhones in these countries. It's just the tip of the iceberg. The easiest part, the supply chain and the neural are still in China, and the Chinese regime is making it difficult for Apple to leave, delaying or sabotaging the shipment of equipment. In addition, Apple has trained millions of workers in China. That won't move, and there is real risk of intellectual property theft. What has happened in some cases, although Apple has announced an investment of $500 billion in the United States over the next 4 years. This is basically marketing. They plan to create only 20,000 jobs. Well, it's clear. Apple is not leaving China. And Uncle Terry, well, this one is laughing last. If you liked this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That helps a lot.